Clerk, can you just please call the roll?
For Chairman Paguda.
Present.
Vice Chair Brown, for acting leader, and the absent.
Vinny, I'm having trouble hearing her.
Hear me now?
Just a little quiet, Allison.
Sorry about that. Secretary Treasurer Good.
Present.
Thank you. Member. John, are you with us?
Yes, I can barely hear you. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. Member Armstrong will be absent today. Member Knight.
Present.
Okay, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. If you all would please stand up for the pledge, and Phil, would you lead us off?
It'll be a pleasure. Please join me in pledging allegiance to the great republic and the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. Move right along to item 3, Title VI Policy and Meeting Procedures. CYMPO complies with the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and related non-discrimination statutes and regulations in all programs and activities. Members of the public may review the CYMPO Title VI plan and submit a self-identification survey by accessing the CYMPO website. A reminder to those attending the meeting, please keep your line on mute until you wish to speak. This meeting is available for public viewing on the CYMPO YouTube page. And moving along with number 4, this is a call to the public. This is basically an opportunity to provide for presentation or comments by the public on subjects not on the agenda. Individuals wishing to address the board need not request permission in advance and are limited to 3 minutes. So at this time, Vinny, do you see anybody that's looking around wanting to talk?
At this time, I don't see anyone, but just a reminder to you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, yes, we do have, this is Zoom webinar. We do have the public present. At this point, we have 6 people logged in as attendees. Those of you that are attendees in this call to the public, you can virtually click on the link to raise your hand, and you can offer your public comment at this time, or when the chair, excuse me, calls for it on future agenda items. Again, you're welcome to raise your hand. With that said, Mr. Chair, I don't see any hands virtually raised at this point.
All right, thank you. Move to item 5, consideration and possible action to approve the April 21st, 2021 Executive Board regular meeting minutes. I believe the board should have all received a copy from Allison. Were there anything that stood out or needed comments? Oh, Alvin, good to see you.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, sir. You kind of just popped onto my screen all of a sudden. So if there's nothing in regards to our executive board meetings, I'm going to need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second, Cal.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Allison, you good with that?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And now moving on to item 6, CYMPO Administrator Report. I'll turn this over to Mr. Gallegos.
Mr. Chair, would you be able to allow me to hold off on that item? I think it would be of value if we had the county representation. Supervisor Brown, there's a few items that relates to him.
Yeah.
Marlene just reached out and let me know that Craig is on the call.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Then let me go ahead and provide the updates at this time, Mr. Chair, members of the board. A couple items that I have listed here and a few more that I added to the list. We are continuing to have discussions with ADOT, and Alvin will help me out a little bit with this update. The State Route 69 widening that's taking place between Prescott and Prescott Valley, coming in front of the Lowe's area there. We are running into some cost overruns with the design. CYMPO is responsible for those cost overruns. The initial dollar amount that was presented to CYMPO was $208,000. Since then, I've had a conversation with the City of Prescott staff and Yavapai County, and there was some tentative support to be able to actually share in those costs. A reason for that is if CYMPO pays the full amount, it will nearly wipe us out on our activity for fiscal year 22. So we did have some initial support. However, since then, ADOT has returned with some additional amounts. So we are, as of today, sitting at $350,000. And I wanted Alvin to help me out a little bit with this, to just talk for a brief moment, Alvin, if you could, as to where some of these cost overruns are taking place with the design of the 69 widening.
Sure, Mr. Chairman and Vinny. Between the 60% and the 95% design, we did have to acquire a new temporary construction easement, and then also what was going to be just a temporary construction easement in another location became actual right-of-way acquisition. So in light of that, we had additional costs for basically doing the titles and plans and survey. And so basically our estimate is about roughly 100,000 more on the right-of-way acquisition than what we originally had. And that basically is what takes it up to the good part of the higher number. And then there's some additional costs for utility potholing as well. But those were some of the key things. The right of way, when they do tend to have some contingencies in place when they're estimating their budget, so they don't have to come back later. So it's possible that when it's all said and done, it may not ultimately come out to that much, but I want to manage expectations and don't want to give you the false hope now. But I'll take any questions that you guys have on that.
Thank you, Alvin. And if I can kind of wrap that part up, and just by saying again, a reminder to the group, we're looking at around a $13 million project. As of today, CYMPO's contributed $800,000 to the project. Yavapai County is around $300,000, flood control and Yavapai County both $300,000. The city of Prescott is at $300,000. Again, after this meeting and in the next week to come, I do want to visit more with the city of Prescott and Yavapai County, and again, see if they're willing to share in those costs of $350,000. So with that said, I'm with Alvin. Happy to take any questions or comments on that brief update.
Question, Vinny.
Yes, sir.
So this is going from 208 to 350.
Yes, sir.
And in at least the previous agreement, there was about a 50-50 split between City of Prescott and Yavapai County.
Three-way split between CYMPO, Prescott, and Yavapai County.
So the cost overrun would be split the same percentage?
Yes, it would be split equally, 1/3 to each of those entities.
Well, at least my decision yesterday to support a second budget workshop for the city probably was, in retrospect, a good idea, because we were just about ready to adopt the original draft, and this would be, a pretty significant new chunk of capital support coming from the city budget. So at least there's an opportunity maybe for you to reach out to the city manager and our director of capital works, public works, and see if we can accommodate that difference.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Member Good. So yeah, I had reached out with staff before. Again, we had a tentative support from your staff when it was a commitment around 70,000. So in light of this new update, the new commitment would be around 116,000. So I do, Member Good, I will follow up with the city manager and the public works director, and also with respect to Yavapai County with Supervisor Brown and Dan Cherry, who's in the meeting. So we'll definitely be following up, and I appreciate the open conversations.
So that would be a $46,000 increase over where we had already previously offered.
That would be correct.
70 to 116.
Correct.
If I may, Mr. Chair, this is Dan Cherry
Absolutely.
with the County Public Works Department. Obviously we would need our own Board of Supervisor approval for this, but I would imagine that we can find a way to come up with this funding. I assume we're talking about within the current fiscal year, Vinny, or do you know if it would spill into after July 1st?
At this point, it can go in after July 1st, Dan and Mr. Chair and members of the board. So yeah, Dan, I've talked with ADOT. We've gone back and forth several times. At this point, they're fully prepared. After July 1st would be acceptable.
Okay. I don't, obviously, again, I can't speak for our board, but I don't know that it matters one way or the other. It would likely come out of our regional road program monies. I know we had the capacity in there for the 70,000 and the chairman was very supportive of being a part of that. However, with this increase, we just need to circle the wagons again and talk about it, and ultimately have an IGA that we can bring back, or I should say an amendment to the IGA to bring back for consideration. So
yeah, I appreciate that, Dan and Mr. Chair, members of the board. Will definitely I'll circle back with both City of Prescott staff and Yavapai County staff, and I appreciate the willingness to continue the conversation.
All right, thanks, Vinny.
You're welcome. Second update is the State Route 89 to 89A on-ramps. The request for quotes is currently out. The quotes are due to CYMPO this coming Friday. So once we receive the quotes for the project, the TAC and staff will review those quotes and select a consultant to begin the work of evaluating that on-ramps project. So just wanted to give you an update. It's moving along as scheduled. Looking forward to see who puts in a quote for it and to really evaluate that particular on-ramps. Board retreat, we're still looking to the second or third week of July. Allison later this week will send all of you a survey of potential dates to see what would work best for the most amount of people. Again, we're looking at the executive board, the technical committee, and staff to be able to come together for a few hours. The primary focus of the agenda is the transportation improvement program for the next 5 years. So again, we have some tentative planning projects of significance in the Great Western, Sundog Connector, State Route 69, and we'll go ahead and take time to sit down with you and see if we're all on the same page as to the priority and the order of events. So that's our goal. Another update is Councilmember Good shared with me yesterday something that he's working with staff on. That's a park and ride, a potential park and ride near the airport. And he asked if we would be able to put it on the agenda and offered to place it on your next June executive board agenda. And in the meantime, I'm going to put it on the TAC agenda, and staff will continue to educate ourselves as to, what role the MPO can play in the park and ride. But if I could just call on Councilman Good for a moment to maybe give us a heads up, but we'll put it on the next agenda, Phil. And if you wanted to share anything else for us on it briefly would be great.
Well, I think at our last meeting, we were discussing the possibility that there might be a substantial amount of federal infrastructure funding that could be coming forward. And the sooner that we had a pretty well-defined or at least roughed out proposal to be able to put in front of whoever makes that decision, I think would be important to do so rather than wait, try to develop something later and find out that maybe some other municipalities or metropolitan areas might be better prepared and in front of the line, so to speak. So this concept of an area that's pretty close to the airport, I think would be beneficial for almost every one of our municipal areas that have representation on the CYMPO board, because we would be improving and reducing transportation capacity, or at least the number of vehicles that are either coming east or westbound on 89A, either north or southbound on 89 from Chino Valley, coming more northbound on 89, and all the commuters that we've heard analysts describe how many are moving and commuting into the downtown Prescott area, whether it's for healthcare or government jobs, etc. So being able to offload a number of those vehicles, have a convenient park and ride location that's near the airport, I think would benefit all the consumers, all the workers, and even some of our new airport tourists and business commuters as well. So I think it checks a lot of the boxes.
Thank you, Councilman Good. We'll put that on the TAC agenda and the next executive board agenda. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that. And then my final update, Mr. Chair, members of the board, as you've all received a notification, Alvin Stump is leaving us. We're not sure why. This is such a great place for him, but he's chosen some other opportunities. And I just wanted to take a moment and really express some real gratitude. You know, Alvin has been, for me, just an incredible representative of Arizona Department of Transportation. And he's looking behind him because CYMPO has just provided him a gift that, if you would hold that up to Alvin's surprise, he has a street name sign that has been made, and it's blending with your background, so you might have to turn your background off for a minute. But yesterday, with the help of Yavapai County, with Supervisor Brown and Dan Cherry, we were able to make a street name sign. If you want to hold it up, Alvin, it's Alvin Stump Circle is what it says on it.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to get the background turned
If
out.
you turn it off, it should show. But anyway, the street name sign's just a token of appreciation, rather than a plaque that he might just toss in a box and carry with him. You can hang the street name sign up, just not on an official road anywhere, Alvin. You'll get in trouble by ADOT or one of the jurisdictions. But Alvin, truly thank you so much for being available so often to answer calls, to sit down with us and work through ideas, and just to be so responsive. Really, your leadership has been amazing. I know with me in Havasu and in CYMPO, and Mr. Chair, those are my updates. I just wanted to wrap up by expressing some real gratitude. And again, thank you to the county for making that sign for Alvin as a token of appreciation.
Oh, absolutely. We're diving right in. Number 7, Kevin, you're up, buddy. RTAC update.
Hey, thank you. And there's a tremendous amount going on. Last night, a budget spreadsheet was released, which basically lays out the proposal that has been agreed to between the legislative leadership and the governor. There is not the adequate number of votes to pass it quite yet. So there's still going to be quite a bit of debate that goes on, and probably quite a bit of tweaking, but I think it is significant. The public typically doesn't see a document this extensive unless they're fairly confident they're relatively close to coming to an agreement. It is roughly a 13 billion budget. It basically, that translates to about a 25% increase. And to some extent that was expected because of the skinny budget that they passed last year, which was essentially a continuing resolution. You know, the pandemic hit and they wanted to get out of Dodge quick. And so they just basically passed an extension of last year's spending levels. And so I think that explains a lot of the increases. Of course, the revenue situation continues to be unprecedented and staggeringly high. We're seeing revenue growth at the state level, plus a tremendous influx of federal relief funding. It does appear that the big hangup, as far as the budget is concerned, is a tax package, and the centerpiece of that is a phase in to a 2.5% flat income tax rate for everyone in the state, 2.5% being lower than any of the current rates. It's anticipated that that would result in an average 1.5 billion loss in state revenue going forward. That has triggered some backlash from the rank and file members. So not everybody is on board as far as the extent of the tax cuts. And then also there's the question of whether or not local governments will be held harmless from those tax cuts with revenue sharing, which will also be a concern and obstacle for many members unless that is at least partially, if not fully, addressed. As far as transportation is concerned, the spreadsheet that we did receive did include the projects that they propose to be included in the budget. This is not a sticking point as far as passage, and other than there are many projects that weren't included in an effort to try to get those included. But I think that if you are on that list, I'm speculating here, but I think you're in really good shape. That list does include, I believe it's 4.7 million for the repaving of 69 through Prescott Valley. It also includes 110 million statewide for pavement preservation projects. And it includes 18 million into the state aviation fund for capital improvements at the public airports. And so while I still think there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done to get the adequate number of votes to pass this, the transportation portion of it is probably fairly solid. That comes in at about 288 million in earmarked funding for transportation. Leadership had earlier indicated they were setting aside 200 million. So we did see quite a significant increase. And so that is where we are at the state level. At the federal level, the president proposed a massive 2.3 trillion jobs plan. Republicans countered that they are open to an infrastructure plan that would be limited to what's considered traditional infrastructure, including transportation. The president and Democrat leaders in Congress responded that they are open to separating the president's proposal into separate packages and pursuing or addressing the infrastructure package first. And so I think that's a real positive for there to be the potential for some very significant federal revenue to come in for the infrastructure for probably 5 to 8 years going forward. Of course, the age-old issue of how you pay for it is starting to creep up more and more into those conversations. There are a couple of new proposals that are on the table, so I think that's probably a fairly positive development as well as far as the prospects of something happening. There are two things we got to look at. Authorization of all the current federal transportation programs is due on top of this infrastructure package that may go through. And depending on how the negotiations go, you may see them combined, merged as one and passed out, or you could see both pursued separately. But in any one of those scenarios, I do think there's tremendous potential for there to be some significant federal revenue directed at the infrastructure. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
You have any questions for Kevin?
Yeah, Kevin, feel good. What does it look like for her funds being able to be actually fully funded and not swept for other purposes?
For about the last 3 years, we've made some very substantial progress on HERF raids. You know, we haven't, I think legislators have prioritized addressing the underinvestment in infrastructure. And while we don't have quite the consensus we need to pursue a revenue increase, like a gas tax increase, for example, they have at least decided to stop rating the existing funding, as well as directing surplus funding to the infrastructure. So we were already headed in that direction, and the locals have been held harmless from HERF raids for several years now. But we were concerned going into this year that highway safety fee that got implemented a couple of years ago, that's scheduled to repeal on July 1st, and that was going to create a $160 million hole in the highway patrol operation budget. And we were concerned we were going to go right back to fighting over HERF as far as how you fill that gap. And fortunately, very early on, it became very clear, even with the governor's budget proposal in January, that it was their full intention to fill that hole with the general fund rather than HERF. And that's not to say that 2-3 years out from now, if we have a downturn in the economy, that we won't go back to fighting over HERF. But as of now, and as far as this budget for this year, we're safe from HERF rates.
Well, that's good to hear. Thanks, Kevin.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. So, anybody else have anything for Kevin? All right, I think we moving on to item 8, review, discussion, and possible action to approve the adoption of ADOT's Transit Asset Management (TAM) Plan Performance Measures. Mr. Gallegos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. In your packet, you have some performance measures as they relate to transit asset management of vehicles, facilities, equipment. If I can anticipate a question from you all as to how this involves CYMPO. CYMPO being the regional planning organization responsible to track and monitor several different types of federal funding. One of them is the funding that relates to transit. There's several numbers that we throw out frequently. Some of those are 5305. That is our transit planning funds that the MPO receives directly. In an urbanized area, we receive 5307 urbanized public transit funds, which the town of Prescott Valley is taking the lead and beginning some transit services. 5310 is federal funds for enhanced mobility of elderly and disabled. Organizations such as New Horizons, People Who Care, organizations like that apply for those federal grants. And then 5311 is transit funds for a rural area, which Yavapai Regional Transit accesses those funds. All of that to say that the MPO plays a role in not only tracking those funds, if you will, but really finding ways to have those funds be accountable to the taxpayers, be good stewards of the resources. But the MPO plays a planning role of coordination and encouraging coordination. So that's where the performance measures come into play, where we're continuing to work with the federal investment into vehicles, facilities, and do we have a good state of repair of vehicles, a state of condition of vehicles and facilities. So a long explanation, but in your packet, these are performance measures that are presented by ADOT, and they are presented here for you. that we would be in line with the performance measures for transit-related services. And CYMPO continues to try and facilitate, again, the use of federal funds in the region. With that said, I'll take any questions or comments you might have.
Yeah, Vinny, I have just a question of trying to understand this. Our 2019 target, all of those criteria in the asset class for revenue vehicles were 30%, and they're going to be declining down to 26% for fiscal year 2023. Whereas I think when it comes to asset category performance measures, they're pretty well stable throughout that period of time. So does that mean that if there were to have revenue vehicles within the first criteria or category, they're going to require that they be replaced earlier? Is that what that means?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Member Good and board members. Yes, so what we would be doing is we would be working with the various organizations that have federal investment in vehicles. And to Member Good's question and point, there are certain thresholds that vehicles do need to be replaced at a certain mileage level, at a certain age level, when there's a federal investment.
Right.
Up until that point, it's the responsibility of the organization to continue to maintain that adequately, to keep that up. Again, you look at the 5310, so I think New Horizons is a great example of they apply for federal funds and they have a fleet of vehicles that are supported through this particular transit grant funds, and they're needing to maintain those vehicles. And as an example, when they reach a certain, again, mileage and or year, then they do need to be replaced. If that addresses and gives you an example, Member Good, does that answer your question?
I think so. So if you could give me a hypothetical example, in the past, if the 30% of their vehicles exceeded their useful life, then they would be required to replace those or bring their fleet up, or is it individual vehicles?
To the best of my knowledge, that's actually a very good and a specific question. And I'm going to hold off on answering it completely because I would be curious and I need to get clarification, and happy to follow up in an email to you and the rest of the board with an answer. I feel like it does impact the entire fleet because there's federal dollars involved.
Right.
But I am concerned, I think, before I answer that officially, to say that there are some fleets out there that are pretty significant. Again, New Horizons being a good example, that they do purchase a lot of other vehicles outside of federal funds. So let me go ahead and follow up with an official answer in an email to you all, and I'll get clarification on that.
Yeah, I think particularly Prescott Valley, since they're going to be involved in a new micro transportation system, probably would need to know, along with the rest of us, that once those federal funds are acquired, then they have to plan in more early replacement of vehicles once they exceed their useful life.
Yeah, and I can get a clarification. And Chairman, also Supervisor Brown has his hand raised.
Here, I have a question that is not related to what is being spoken to here right now. However, I have a problem, Vinny. Previously, and I wasn't able to comment because I was in the car trying to get in here to the computer. You asked if, Yavapai County is willing to put up approximately $150,000 more, along with the city of Prescott and CYMPO, putting in their third of the project for 69. And I'm wondering to myself why, and I'm asking this really of Gary Knight, since he sits on the transportation board. But it seems to me that the legislature is taking over our job. If they're going to individually go to the governor and say, fund this project, traffic project or road project or whatever it may be, why do we exist? Nobody's coming to us for any of the support. Nobody's coming to us to ask what the priorities are. So why is that? Why should we put up this 150,000? Let the, the representatives and or senators come up with the 300 or $450,000. Why us? I'm waiting for somebody to answer me. Gary, I'll go with you first.
I can't answer it. It's
like going around behind our backs.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we've had to do down here, is go to the legislators and try to get money that we couldn't get from ADOT or anywhere else. So we went to the legislators to try to get it, but
so who's going to administer it? ADOT?
Who's going to administer it? ADOT will, as a matter of fact, yes, ADOT will, but ADOT cannot use it for any other project other than the project that the legislature approved it for. In other words, they will administer it. And I tell you this from experience, from what we're doing with widening of Highway 95 down at the legislature appropriated 28 million. That whole 28 million has to go to widening of 95, but ADOT is administering the whole.
Well, what happens if it goes beyond the 28 million? Who puts that up, or do you have to run another bill?
We've got that's a good question, because that's exactly where we're at. The 28 million doesn't even come close. We needed 100 million to do the entire project. So we're having to, at the local level, we're having to apply for a raise grant. That's the one that took the place of the bill grant. We're applying for that. We're applying through that through our local MPO. ADOT came to us and said they applied for the bill grant for last year, and they came to us this year and said, well, we didn't get it last year, so would you apply for it? So now now down here at YMPO, we're applying for the bill for the raise grant to get another 25 million to go with the 28 million, so we can at least get half the project done. So it's a piecemeal thing. We're having to beg for money from any source we can get it from, and then we've also got answered the application to our senator for earmark money that he replied to us. I'm gonna have to put in some projects for these earmarks. Show me fill out this application for what you've got, so I can try to get you some money that way. So we're trying every way we can to get money to do these projects. We don't have any more money than you guys have got. Probably got less, but.
Well, that's kind of the problem, though, because if I have a legislator up there deciding that this is his project, and he basically has given it to ADOT, then he ignores what the MPO says are the priorities of the region or the MPO area. And so then the question comes up is, well, I'll tell you what if the county doesn't put up the 150 or the city doesn't? Then MPO is not going to have to be able to put up the 150 for 69. So then who's going to do it? Is it going to be the legislator next year? Maybe put up the rest of the money that's needed if it falls short?
Well, and that's why, and I think Kevin can speak to this, that's why through RTAC, we were going to present the legislators with projects so that they would know which projects we were prioritizing on a local level.
But that's not what happened.
Not this year, but we got started kind of late. But I think we're going in the right direction. Kevin may be able to add to this, but I think what we propose to do with RTAC is correct. And I think if we have these projects ready to propose to give the legislatures when the legislature convenes next year, it'll be better. That right now it was almost over when we decided to do this, and I think it's good that we decided to do it. It was a little late for this session, but for the next session, hopefully it will help help prioritize from the local level the projects that we want them to support.
Well, if we continue with the legislators, Gary, I would see the ADOT board not having a job.
Yeah,
And we need you guys for.
that's true. I can't disagree. We just become a
Kevin, you
stamp.
got anything you want to say about this? I mean, you know, and I talked yesterday trying to find out this one project that somebody alluded to that they had gotten through and funded. And that's not the way it actually is, but talking $4.7 million for a project nobody knew anything about.
You know, Craig, Mr. Chairman, there are a tremendous lot of problems associated with earmarking. We tried for decades to eliminate it from the federal process, and we're actually successful pretty much fully phasing them out about 10 years ago. And it looks like it's coming back at the federal level as well as what's occurring at the state level. I think you've, for the very, problems that you've mentioned where, is the legislature now in charge and, and they might be able to spout out the merits of their specific project, but they don't know how it relates to other priorities across the state. And that's exactly why we have programming that occurs at the ADOT and regional levels. But I guess we've also got to be somewhat pragmatic. They're not going to increase revenues. And what we're seeing at the state level is they have this surplus, and what's being proposed this year is $288 million in surplus revenue being directed to the infrastructure. I don't think we're going to turn the money down, but it certainly gets away from the programming process that occurs. It is certainly not the best way to fund going forward. What our TAC is trying to do next year is reach a compromise where, okay, if you want to earmark and you want to send funding to direct projects, let us at least tell you what the priorities are across the state based on the transportation planning organization. So we're trying to reach middle ground, but there's no question. We tried to eliminate earmarks before, and they do create a lot of challenges, and it is certainly not the most efficient way to fund our infrastructure.
Well, the problem also exists in Gary's position, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but the board now has got all this money being spent put into ADOT to fund these different special projects, but yet they haven't increased your budget for the projects that are already on the drawing boards and been submitted and approved going into the next 5 years. Am I right?
That's true.
So
that's true.
I don't get it.
At least so far, we've got a meeting coming up Friday. Maybe there's going to be some more money available, but I haven't seen it yet. And we're into the final stages of community input into the 5-year plan. So I'm more worried about what will happen if they do the flat tax to the rural counties, cities, and towns, and all the money that we're going to in state shared revenue that we're going to lose. How are we going to make up for that money?
And they don't have an answer for that. And the flat tax will be at about 2.5%.
Right.
And the problem, and that sounds great, but that also then, the revenues that are shared by the counties and cities is going to disappear.
But I can tell you, the city of Yuma it's going to cost us about $4 million in our general fund, and that's huge. The general fund, 70% of the general fund is police and fire, public safety, and it's like defunding the police. Is what it amounts to. What are we going to do? How can we come up with 4 million in lost general fund revenue. It's going to bankrupt some cities and counties.
All right, I think we need to bring it back around to item 8 and whether or not
Yes.
we're going to get a motion on this.
Sorry about that.
Just throwing that out
Off the
there.
agenda.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's kind of, Kel, Kel, that's kind of a tangent, but this is really, I see as a long-term problem for CYMPO and for, and ADOT especially. I mean, it's like taking away their responsibility, and the board's got really nothing to say about so many of the projects now.
No, Vice Chair, I totally understand where you're going with this. Absolutely. So I think we could.
Not that anybody wants to say no to Prescott Valley projects or anything like that, because anything on 69 would be a blessing. But if you're going to do a little project, why don't you make it a big one and fix the whole damn road all the way up to the Prescott city line?
You're not wrong about that, but I think we could probably be here till this time tomorrow and talk about that.
And Mr. Chair, members of the board, you gave me an opportunity to get clarification on Member Good's question earlier. So it would pertain to the federally invested fleet, not necessarily the entire fleet. So there was I want to offer that clarification. So it's the federal investment infrastructure, and that's where the percentage would apply to, Member Good. So with that said, I'm happy to take any other questions or comments on the item related to transit performance measures.
Do you have anything else for Mr. Gallegos? Then if that's the case, then we will need a motion.
What's our motion here, Pete?
Move to approve the adoption of ADOT's transit and management.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the vote. Or all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Moving on, item 9, review, discussion, and possible action to approve the fiscal year 2022-2023 Unified Planning Work Program. Mr. Gallegos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. You all have already reviewed the work program in detail. Based upon the TAC and staff's recommendation, you sent it out for public review and comment. We have received no input from the public at this time on the document. We have had a review by the Federal Highway Administration, along with the Federal Transit Administration and ADOT. And we've also needed to do some modifications based upon that review. So at this point, I just want to highlight a handful of things that we've done. So I will not take you through the entire document, as we've already done that. So the first item, all items are highlighted in yellow. Since the document went out, you all made an action to place Councilman Phil Good as the Secretary Treasurer. So that is now noted in this document. We got some clarification on, again, this consolidated planning grant funds. We now have the opportunity to combine 2 different types of funding into one, which gives us a lower match. But and that still remains true. However, and again, forgive me, I don't want to get too far in the weeds in this, but what we had listed is the apportionment and the obligation authority. And those are 2 different amounts. What the clarification that ADOT provided to us is for the 5305D part, we don't need to use the lower amount, which is the obligation authority. We actually get to use the apportionment. So long story short, we cleared up the numbers on this table. The numbers are relatively the same with some improvements, and that's why they're highlighted in yellow. At the bottom of this page is our carry forward balance. Again, we're required to put an estimated dollar amount that we will be carrying forward into the next fiscal year. So Allison has updated those dollar amounts, and those are listed on the bottom of page 12. Continuing on, sorry that this table is sideways, but this is just an overall view of all the different elements that CYMPO works on. I just reviewed that first piece, so it's basically a repeat. On page 15, we are going to be utilizing an intern this coming fall. We've been in contact from Arizona State University for an internship. So I needed to put that narrative in here so that we had it noted and documented. We didn't have it previously. I wanted to go ahead and add our CYMPO's involvement with the North Prescott area planning efforts, and also CYMPO's active involvement with the Yavapai County Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, or CPAC. And then we needed to make note of the transit performance measures also in that document. The highlighted budget table at the bottom, again, we continue to receive clarifications. Allison works closely with ADOT Finance, Yavapai County Finance, and the dollar amount that we were showing here was $600 off. So we needed to adjust that table by $600. And that is also the same for this next table. So noted in yellow highlight as I continue. Page 21, part of the review asked if we would go ahead and note something that we're already doing. The MPO is required to do traffic counting as part of a planning organization for transportation. The way that we've developed our partnership over the years is all the member agencies you all do traffic counting for each respective town, cities, and the county, in addition to traffic counts on behalf of CYMPO. So it's really done through our local agencies. So what Federal Highways asked is we go ahead and note that that partnership is in place and is happening right now. The budget table here, let's see, this was for Allison, remind me on this budget table on the bottom. Oh, this was the new one we added, correct? Allison, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We're just updating the CPG amount, the $12,000.
Got it. Okay, so that's the updated consolidated planning fund amount. And that also carries on to the next table, page 23. What I've noticed, and this is a brand new table we went ahead and added, and the reason for it, as you hear frequent updates on finance, we adjust numbers with ADOT Finance, Yavapai County Finance, and Allison, and there's always an adjustment of numbers back and forth. And the practice that we had, I guess, prior to me was we would put either the reduction or the additional funds into particular projects. And that was posing a bit of a problem because when you look at a project and you look at a dollar amount, we were trying to ask questions as to how we arrived at that dollar amount. So rather than to use projects as a catch-all, we've created a new category. So what I would say is this special planning projects budget table will ultimately be programmed into projects such as the Great Western Sundog Connector, maybe improvements we do with the traffic signals, whatever it is, these funds will be ultimately programmed into it. So I would almost consider this a parking lot versus the practice that we had before, that we were taking these dollars and directly putting them into projects. So this is a new table, and you can see we did add a dollar amount as a placeholder that I think will help us basically in better planning and organization. And then I think we're on the home stretch here. So page 29 of the work program, again, another view of what we've already covered today. The carry forward dollar amounts are listed in here. The Great Western update, the reason why this is highlighted is we were going back and forth here at the end of the fiscal year with being able to pay for the State Route 89 to 89A on-ramps project. And we were working with finance to get clarification. Long story short, we were able to pay out of it. We were able to pay for that project out of fiscal year 21, which allowed those funds that we thought were going to come out of 22. Those are put into the Great Western Study Update, which we'll talk more at the retreat in July. I just mentioned this special planning projects category. Again, a new category as a temporary place to be able to capture the funds that we're working with. And then again, this transit planning was part of that consolidated grant funds earlier. And I believe that's it. So with that said, I know I ran through several changes, but we would be looking for your recommendation for approval of the work program with the noted changes. And again, my apology for the list of changes. However, we've had a couple really key meetings over the last month. So I'll be happy to take questions or comments at this time.
I had a question, Benny.
Yes, sir.
Is that an internship program going to be a paid internship or is it non-paid?
At this time, I've offered an unpaid internship, but we actually, Mr. Chair and members of the board and Member Good, we do actually have some additional transit planning funds. And I am exploring the possibility of it being a paid one because we do have some transit planning dollars that have been unused. So I am talking with Yavapai County Human Resources and to determine what my options are. At this point, I have offered an unpaid as it stands today. Wendy Ross, though, is working with the County Board of Supervisors, and they're revising what internships, job descriptions, and pay might be. And I'll have a better answer probably in the next 1 to 2 months from the county resources, human resources.
Benny, could
One
this
other
be
question.
covered by NACOG?
I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, what was the question?
Could this be covered by some kind of funding through NACOG?
Mr. Chair and Supervisor Brown, there is a NACOG internship program. The intern that has reached out to me that we would like to work with isn't registered through the NACOG program. Theirs is, I believe, a summer program, and I did consider that also. So again, as it stands, we've offered them an unpaid internship. Depending what Human Resources Director Wendy Ross comes back with, I may come back and revise that. So
I had one more comment, Denny. I know we've been fortunate to be in a very, very low inflationary environment over the last number of years, no question. But as we're seeing inflationary pressures continue to escalate, this is really, I would think, going to be very difficult to be able to plan 5-year budgets out. And as we've seen from Chairman Supervisor Brown's comments, we have less and less control over what the state wants to request of us. Even when we do have skin in the game, they come back and say, well, you need to give us more skin in the game. And I think some of that's going to continue to grow as infrastructure, materials, labor, et cetera, become a bigger and bigger inflationary component of your economic planning. Any comments on that?
yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Councilman Good. Definitely. I guess my one comment that comes to mind, I would like to think, at least in my time in transportation, the last 8 or so years, we've started some really serious conversations to do a lot better job in a short amount of time with some real predictions. Clearly, there's a long list of things that are way out of our control, but I will tell you, compared to where we were with ADOT and others in developing a scope for projects, and this conversation of cost overruns is always an extremely tenuous conversation. And I think what makes it worse, and Alvin will agree with me, is when we have a dollar amount of like 208,000 on the table, I go and I talk with Supervisor Brown and Dan and staff And then a week later, ADOT staff contacts me and that dollar amount changes. I think that's where we get into real big issues. With that said, though, Councilman, I at least would like to say that staff is doing a way better job in getting accurate scoping. Where it completely blows out of the water, and Supervisor Brown will chime in on this, I would assume, is as projects sit and it takes time. You know, we have projects that stretch out over a period of time, and that's where it gets incredibly difficult. You know, one example is in Havasu. You know, we had a project that took 10 years and it hit the 10-year mark and it had to get delivered. And, you know, I was working with ADOT, the MPO, the city, and we delivered it. But over 10 years, there's a lot that changes. So that's an extreme example. But
Yeah.
I would like to say we're doing better work with ADOT, but I'm sure there's more improvements that can be done.
Thank you.
Looking for a motion then for item 9.
Hey, Kel, before the motion, could I ask one question?
Absolutely, sir.
Who's the official representative from Chino Valley now?
Councilman Armstrong is, and he needed to be absent today, but it's Tom Armstrong.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
Nope, that'll do it. And I would assume Dewey Humboldt is still the mayor.
Yes, and he
John's
is.
on.
Yes, I am.
Oh, are you on here, John?
Yes, I am. Oh, yes.
By the
Yes.
way, just be in parting to Alvin, since this is apparently his last meeting, just wanted to comment that Dan Cherry, when he decided to, to work on getting this sign put up for Alvin that we thought was very appropriate, the original thought was is we would put it up in the middle of an ADOT roundabout.
Dewey Humboldt will be the first place for it.
That's why it's Alvin Stump Circle.
How about if we just get a statue of Alvin? That would be better.
That would be good.
You need to show the sign now. Come on.
Sounds expensive.
Alvin,
Sure, yeah. No,
Alvin, we all wish you the best of luck, though, and all kidding around and aside, I think all of us, all of the cities and towns in this area, owe you a debt of gratitude and really do appreciate everything you've done for us in the past.
Oh, there it is. There's the sign.
Yeah, there you go.
yes, yes, Alvin. Good job.
Thank you guys, very much appreciated. Really appreciate the sign, and I just consider myself very fortunate to have been here during this time and getting to work with all the communities and all the projects in the areas. That's just got a lot of gratitude. Really enjoyed it.
Hey, Alvin, it's Phil Bordon. I sent you something this morning. Just wanted to say thank you. You've been great to work with.
Thanks, Phil. Likewise.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll be seeing you again. Take care.
But no, it's been great. This area has accomplished a lot by working together, and I think that's what's really made it happen, is all the partnerships. And so I, like I said, consider myself fortunate to have been working with all you guys.
And I will make sure that I let Paulden know that you're going to miss him.
Okay.
All right. Now is it time for a motion? Item 9?
Yeah.
All right. Now, Craig, anytime.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Moving on, item 10, review, discussion, and possible action to authorize the chair to sign the grant agreement between CYMPO and the state of Arizona. Mr. Gallegos.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you. In your packets, you have the grant agreement. This is set with the state of Arizona through the Attorney General's office and Arizona Department of Transportation. This is a if you will, a standard agreement to the MPOs of Arizona. So I will I do want to emphasize that it's a relatively hefty document. The CYMPO attorney has reviewed it and has signed off on the document. All the MPOs have the same agreement in the state of Arizona with the state of Arizona. So again, it originates through the Attorney General's office from the state of Arizona. It outlines the roles and responsibilities of the MPO. It is, one of the examples would be the work program that we've spent some time getting through and getting approved today. It outlines dates and other responsibilities that we have. But before I take questions and comments, again, it is not necessarily unique to CYMPO. It is an agreement with CYMPO and the state of Arizona, but I just want to let the group know if there's anything that you were looking to change. Again, that would need to go back to the Attorney General's office and our attorney, but at this point, we don't see any issues with it. I would say the one, and this comes up every 2 years, the one significant area of changes was levels of insurance. Allison and I have met with our insurance company, which is Brown & Brown Insurance in the city of Prescott. And there were a few areas that we needed to make some adjustments. We've done that. And we are it will be very soon in alignment with the agreement. So outside of that, there wasn't anything of significant changes from previous agreements. With that said, happy to take questions or comments.
I have a question.
Yes.
Vinny, I was looking for more of a definition of disadvantaged business enterprises, because I know the agreement requires quite a bit of monitoring and making sure that disadvantaged business enterprises are included and monitored within these grants. And then secondly, also tribal native obligations that have the same type of monitoring requirements. So have those changed at all? Because I'm reminded of the furthering fairer housing requirements under the Obama administration that were really quite almost damaging to some communities that accepted them and then found after the fact that they had to almost import certain ethnicities to be able to not have to have their funds returned. So I just want to make sure that these are requirements that maybe were originally designed under the Trump administration, and we're not seeing changes coming from the Biden administration.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Councilman Good, to the best of my knowledge, to the latter part, I want to say no, and I don't have a 100% answer on it, but I will say the Biden administration, as it relates to this document was well under works, and I want to say any initiative and activity, I don't believe with the overall time schedule is reflected in this. If you'd like, I can follow up and get a more certain answer on that. So I don't believe that's would be in this particular document. The other part to your DBE and tribal affairs part, this would be, I think the best way for me to illustrate this is ADOT has both of those offices. They have a DBE office and they have a tribal affairs office that we work with, and they are the ones that help us and assist us in really understanding what the policy says and what is being asked of us. And I would say, especially DBE, we rely on them to make sure that we have the required federal and state language in our documents. And then for any particular goals or numbers that are set, we do rely on them to provide that to us. And we also ask them for really their assistance so that we're delivering it according to the law. Same thing with the tribal engagement office. That's another office that, and again, we have a very small part within the CYMPO region, but we still look to that tribal ADOT office to provide us with information as to how we're engaging the tribe in projects and in the region. So at this point, we're really are relying on those two offices to have the expertise and help us out. I hope that answers your questions and your comments.
Well, it looks like when we sign this, we are accepting and agreeing what those disadvantaged business enterprises, et cetera, are, how they're defined. And then over the course of the grant period, if those definitions change, are we subject to the obligations of those changed definitions?
To the best of Mr. Chair, members of the board, Councilman Good, I would say as I understand it, when those changes take place, that would be an amendment or would need to be an amendment if it's outside of what is defined in this agreement, which there are times throughout the year when we do receive amendments to it. I think we just had one just within the last few months. It wasn't related to what you're asking, but as language changes, that does need to be agreed upon amendment and signed off by the appropriate individuals.
All right, I just want to make sure that we're properly protected from maybe the old saying, I'm here from the federal government and I'm here to help.
Thank you very much. And again, our attorney has reviewed it on behalf of CYMPO and has signed off on it at this time.
All right, very good.
All right, with that being said, we'll get a motion.
Okay.
Move to authorize the chair to sign the grant agreement.
Second. I'll just second it. All in favor?
Yes, second.
Aye.
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 All opposed? All right, moving on. Item 11, review, discussion, and possible action to approve posting the public involvement plan for public comment. Mr. Gallegos.
I'm going to thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm going to ask Daniel, our transportation planner, to give me a little bit, my voice a break, and he'll walk you through this briefly. Daniel?
Yes, thank you. So the public involvement plan is part of our Title VI plan. It's just a separate document. And the purpose of this is to outline how the public can participate in our Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, our Regional Transportation Plan, our Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan, as well as our Unified Planning Work Program. And this document is entirely for public to kind of the guidelines of how to participate with each program, how to provide comment, as well as attending both the TAC meetings and board meetings. And then it outlines the certain period for public comment for each document. And the public involvement plan itself will also have to go out for a 45-day public comment period. So if this is approved today, that will be the next step, and this would be posted for 45 days. Outside of that, this document is pretty straightforward, and I can answer any questions you may have.
We have any questions for Daniel? With no questions, we can get a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the plan. And by the way, Daniel, good job.
Thank you.
I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute. Moving on to Regional Mobility Management and Transit Update. Mr. Gallegos, you're up.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, wanted to have this as a standing item so that we can provide some updates, and this will be a brief update, but just wanted to share with you again what's a little bit of activity that's happening in the region that needs to be brought to the table and shared and commended. So we continue, the MPO continues to work as a planning organization. I recently met with the town of Prescott Valley with both Norm Davis and the new transit manager, Pedro Rodriguez, that has been hired by the town of Prescott Valley to be able to hear about some of the movement going forward. And I'll call on Mayor Pelguda to share if you wanted to add some things, but I believe the town does have a work session tomorrow evening. I'll be joining you to listen in and talk a little or hear a little bit more about what's being talked about with the transit activities for the town of Prescott Valley. Mayor Palguda, did you want to add anything before I move on from that item?
Yeah, just going to briefly add that, yeah, he's been on the payroll for about 18 days right now, I believe it is. So he'll be at a work study tomorrow and basically introducing himself to council and just kind of going over a rough idea of what things look like from his point of view. So I look forward to that.
Thank you very much, and appreciate staff reaching out to CYMPO staff and continuing conversations. You know, we just want to really be able to support the region. I'm currently sitting on the Arizona Transit Association board, and we have definitely contacts, you know, to be able to support regional transit, continuing to look for opportunities to support Yavapai Regional Transit, to look at what's happening with coordination of mobility management. I am currently talking with the NACOG staff. CYMPO does have a partnership agreement for NACOG to do mobility management for all of Yavapai County, which is also including on behalf of the CYMPO region. So I am talking with their director, Chris Fetzer, and their staff, and looking at what is best for both of us, but in my role, what is best for CYMPO. And I will bring some updates at future meetings to share with you, but I just want to let you know I am evaluating that. That's all I have at this point, but I do want to keep this conversation going and on the table. Happy to take any questions or comments on that.
Any questions for Mr. Gallegos on this one? If not, moving on, item 13, ADOT Northwest District Report. Alvin, it's all yours for the last time.
All right, Mr. Chairman, just wanted to share, we did have 2 virtual public meetings last week that went well. We had, I think, over 30 people attend, and we are moving forward with finalizing the design and the right-of-way and utility relocations, and the plan is to advertise, you know, next summer for construction. So looking forward to that. Just a little bit outside the CYMPO area, but north of Paulden, we will be doing a microseal project between Paulden and Hell Canyon. Our maintenance crews are doing some prep work right now, but sometime in July and August, that work will be going on. The Road 1 North signal has had some delays with utilities and conflicts. I believe now the contractor's gonna start work after the 1st of July now, but just we had our conflict and then just rescheduling, but that's another one we're looking forward to get going. So that is all I have. I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Alvin? Other than, sir, good luck. Thank you for what you've done around here. Yeah, amazing job.
Alvin, has there been any
Thank you,
movement
guys.
on safety funding for any of the other projects that were located on 89 North?
So right now we got 3 projects funded. There's Little Ranch Road left turn lane, that's in fiscal year 24. There's also a passing lane between Road 5 North and Old 89. That's also in 24. And then there's funding for a center line rumble strip north of Paulden up to Ash Fork. That's in 23. And then we're going to be doing, I guess it won't be me now, but statewide there'll be the call for the next round of HSIP projects, and so we'll be targeting all of our routes to identify new opportunities for projects.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Alvin, thank you, sir. Moving on, last item, State Transportation Board update. Gary, you're up.
I'll be brief. The next Transportation Board meeting is Friday. It's the last chance for public input to the, and comment to the proposed 5-year plan, 22 to 26. That was originally scheduled for Tucson, and that has been changed now to a virtual WebEx meeting. They're getting pretty good with them. If you want to come in to, if you want to attend, call to the public, just go to the Transportation Board website, fill out the necessary form, and you'll be able to comment to the board via WebEx, and it's been working quite well. Or you can just submit your comments to be read onto the record. But as I mentioned, this will be the final meeting for public comment on the proposed 5-year plan. So that's this Friday at 9 a.m. I can answer any questions if anybody has a question.
Gary, I'd appreciate it if you just pass on to the rest of the board from me, my concerns over what's happening in the legislature and what it could occur.
Okay, I'll do that. It's not as easy virtually as it would be when we were all together, but I'll give it a whirl.
Thank you.
Anything else? If not, we're item 15. If anyone else has anything for the good of the order, otherwise we're going to go to adjournment. All right.
Okay.
This is adjourned at what I have as 4:21 p.m.
Thank you all.
Mr. Chair, thank you all. Have a good evening.